Okay, welcome to the deep dive. So, today we're diving into something. Well, it's huge, isn't it? This question of free will.
It really is. Do we actually choose what we do, or is it something else?
Exactly. Most of us, I think, feel like we're in the driver's seat, making decisions, consciously, minute by minute.
Mm-hmm. That feeling is very strong.
But our source today, it really throws a wrench in that. We're looking at the neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky, specifically his book, Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will.
Yeah, and Sapolsky, he doesn't just question it. He comes out with a pretty definitive science-backed no free will.
A hard no, not even a little bit.
Nope. His argument is that, well, if you follow the science, there's just no room left for it. Every action, every thought, it's all determined by this incredibly complex web of biology and environment.
And that's really our mission here, isn't it? To unpack how he connects all that science, neuroscience, genetics, stress physiology, to this massive philosophical conclusion.
Right. It's not just theory. He's pushing towards, real-world consequences, how we should think about blame, punishment, even success.
Okay, so let's get into it. It's
Okay.
definitely fascinating. But I gotta say, it also feels pretty unsettling.
Deeply unsettling for many people, yeah. Let's start with his core idea, this concept of determinism. He argues that what feels like a conscious choice is really just the very last step, the final domino falling in a long chain reaction of cause and effect.
A chain stretching way back.
Way back. And the key is we didn't choose any of the links in that chain. They're outside our control. Now, he's careful to say this isn't fatalism. That's important.
Right, because people immediately jump to, well, if it's all determined, why bother trying?
Exactly. Fatalism is like whatever happens, happens, my effort doesn't matter. Determinism, in Sapolsky's view, says your effort itself is part of that determined chain.
Ah, okay. So if I work hard and succeed, that hard work was also determined by my biology and history.
Precisely. The effort wasn't magically conjured by free will. It was caused. You're not a robot, he stresses that, but you are a biological organism subject to cause and effect, just like everything else in the universe.
And the power of his argument, I think, comes from the sheer amount of scientific evidence he layers on. It's like he's excavating the causes of a single action.
Yeah, layer by layer.
Let's start right at the moment of action with neurobiology. This relies a lot on findings like, the Libet experiments from decades ago. They showed brain activity ramping up before people reported consciously deciding to make a simple movement.
So the brain's already gearing up to act. And then later, my conscious mind goes, okay, I choose to do this now. Like, it's catching up.
Kind of like the press secretary announcing a decision that was already made in the back rooms, yeah. The feeling of I choose comes after the neurological process is underway.
And he gets specific talking about brain regions, like the prefrontal cortex, especially the VMPFC part of it. It helps regulate emotion and impulsive decisions. If yours is structured differently because of genetics, or maybe it's temporarily offline because you're super stressed, well, your choice in that moment will be different.
And you didn't choose that brain structure or the stress level hitting you right then.
Exactly. You didn't choose the hardware or the immediate operating conditions.
Okay, mind's sort of blown already. But then he zooms out, right? If brain chemistry drives the action, where does that come from?
Right. Next layer out. Genetics. Obviously, we don't pick our genes.
Yeah.
And they influence so much basic temperament, how impulsive you might be, how sensitive your dopamine reward system is. These are the building blocks of what we often call personality, which guides decisions.
But it's not just like one gene equals one behavior, is it?
Yeah.
It's more complicated.
Oh, way more complicated. He really emphasizes gene-environment interaction, GXE, they call it. A gene might give you a predisposition maybe towards, say, risk-taking, but it might only really express itself, only lead to that behavior if you grow up in a certain kind of environment, maybe one with a lot of instability or stress.
So the gene is like potential, and the environment unlocks it or triggers it.
Yeah, something like that. And you didn't choose the gene, and you definitely didn't choose your childhood environment. Both are just dealt to you.
Which leads perfectly into the next layer he talks about. Development.
Right.
Early life experiences.
Mm-hmm. This is crucial. Sapolsky explains how experiences, especially early on, things like nutrition, neglect, safety, exposure to language, don't just shape you metaphorically, they physically wire your brain.
Literally changing the connections between neurons.
Absolutely. Building the pathways, strengthening some, letting others wither. Your early environment basically constructs the neural architecture you'll use for decision-making for the rest of your life.
So later on, when you're faced with a choice, your thoughts and impulses naturally run down those pre-built highways.
That's the idea. Trying to exert willpower against that deep wiring is incredibly difficult, maybe impossible in his view. That feeling of willpower is just another output of the system itself.
Okay, this is getting heavy. We've got brain circuits, genes, childhood wiring, all internal. But then he brings in the outside world, too. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah, the immediate environment. And not just big things like culture, but like the immediate situation.
Like what?
Well, things like, are you hungry right now? Are you in pain? Is there a stressful noise nearby? Even subtle things, like a particular smell, can trigger associations and influence your judgment and behavior below your conscious awareness.
And bigger stuff, too, right? Like poverty or social conditions.
Oh, absolutely. He talks a lot about stress. Chronic stress, like from poverty or discrimination, literally changes your brain chemistry. It ramps up cortisol, which tends to shut down the thoughtful, long-term planning parts of the prefrontal cortex.
And favors more immediate, reactive, maybe impulsive decisions from older brain regions.
Exactly. So the external situation changes your internal biology, which then determines the choice you make. It all feels personal, but it's driven by these outside factors interacting with your predetermined biology.
So you stack it all up, the milliseconds before, the genes, the childhood, the culture, the immediate context. Sapolsky's conclusion is that there's just no gap left, no space for an uncaused self to jump in and make a truly free choice.
That's the argument. The feeling of free will is a powerful, maybe even necessary illusion the brain constructs after the fact to make sense of its own complex, determined operations.
Okay, let's pause there because,
Yeah.
wow, that leads us straight into the really difficult territory, the so what part.
Yeah, the connection to philosophy, morality, how we run society. If we accept this purely scientific, deterministic picture, well, it forces a radical rethink of some core human concepts.
Yeah, this is where it gets really uncomfortable, I think. What happens to concepts like guilt, blame, moral responsibility? If every action is just the end result of this long chain reaction you didn't start,
Then how can you be truly morally responsible? How can you deserve praise or blame in the ultimate sense? That's the crux of it.
it feels like it pulls the rug out from under our entire justice system, for starters.
It challenges it profoundly. Sapolsky argues that blaming someone, feeling moral outrage, seeking retribution, it's like being angry at a broken car. You might need to fix the car or take it off the road so it doesn't hurt anyone, but being morally angry at the machine itself doesn't make sense.
But wait, isn't the immediate reaction, and I feel this too, that this just gives everyone an excuse? Oh, it wasn't my fault. My biology made me do it. Doesn't it just kill personal responsibility and effort?
That's the number one pushback, definitely. It feels like it undermines human dignity, the effort people put in. Sapolsky's response goes back to that determinism versus fatalism distinction. The feeling of effort is real. The motivation is real. But that feeling, that motivation, your capacity for effort, those are also determined products of your history and biology.
So the person who tries hard was determined to be the kind of person who tries hard in that situation.
Yes. The effort is the mechanism by which the determined outcome occurs. It's not proof of an uncaused choice initiating the effort. You're still the actor, your brain and body produced the action, but you weren't the ultimate uncaused author of it.
Okay. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. It means even when I feel like I'm making the choice, like choosing to really focus on this conversation right now, that feeling is just my conscious awareness watching my determined brain state unfold.
That's the implication. It's a perspective that requires a huge amount of, well, detachment from our usual sense of self as the prime mover. It's justly counterintuitive.
And profoundly challenging to that core belief that we are in control. Even if you're skeptical about free will already, the sheer weight of the biological argument is a lot.
It is. And once you seriously entertain this possibility, he argues, the whole framework for dealing with harmful behavior needs to shift. If actions are determined, then punishment purely for retribution, for making someone pay, loses its justification.
So instead of moral judgment, what takes its place?
Understanding and prevention. That's the key shift. If behavior has specific causes, biological, genetic, developmental, environmental, then the focus should be on understanding those causes and figuring out how to prevent harmful outcomes in the future.
This is where he talks about compassion, right?
Exactly. It becomes about compassion over judgment. Not excusing harmful acts, but changing the response. Instead of blaming the individual evil will, we look for the systemic causes that led to the harm.
It's like treating a disease instead of condemning the symptoms.
That's a good analogy. You still need to manage the danger, protect society. If someone is dangerous because of their determined biological or psychological state, you might still need to isolate them. But the reason changes.
How so?
You isolate them for public safety, like quarantining someone with a highly contagious virus. Not because they deserve to suffer for their bad choices, but because it's necessary to prevent future harm, based on their current determined state. Accountability becomes purely practical, focused on prevention.
So accountability isn't about blame anymore. It's about managing risk and fixing causes where possible.
Exactly. Fix the societal conditions, address the developmental issues, maybe even find biological interventions down the line, though he's cautious about that. The goal shifts from retribution to reducing harm by addressing the causes.
And this perspective, it doesn't just apply to negative stuff like crime. It changes how you see success too, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. It fosters, or should foster, immense humility and empathy. If your successes stem from a fortunate combination of genes, a supportive upbringing, good luck, being in the right place at the right time,
Factors you had no ultimate control over.
then how can you feel arrogant? The
Mhm.
appropriate feeling is gratitude. You realize how much luck, biological and environmental, played a role.
And that naturally makes you look at people who haven't succeeded with more empathy, because their situation is also a product of factors they didn't choose.
That's the hope. It breaks down the idea that people simply get what they deserve based on their freely willed choices. It suggests we're all products of circumstances far beyond our ken. It encourages forgiveness, both for others and, perhaps importantly, for ourselves when we fall short.
So let's try and synthesize this. Sapolsky is basically using a mountain of scientific evidence to say, look, our cherished idea of free will just doesn't hold up.
Right. And accepting that, while maybe scary at first because it seems to diminish us, could actually lead to a more compassionate, more realistic, and maybe fairer world.
Replacing that sort of harsh moral judgment with a focus on understanding causes and preventing harm. It's a kind of practical scientific humanism.
Yeah, tracing that chain of cause and effect back. Looking at the whole picture, neurobiology, development, environment, all of it, and focusing our energy on the parts we can potentially influence, like social conditions or early childhood support.
The big takeaway seems to be this potential for a deep kind of forgiveness, grounded in neuroscience. Forgiveness for others, forgiveness for ourselves, and maybe a lot more gratitude for the good fortune we might have.
Absolutely. It's a challenging read, but the perspective it offers is quite profound.
Okay, so here's the final thought we want to leave you with, something to really chew on. If society, really took Sapolsky's deterministic view seriously, starting tonight, how would our institutions have to change, almost overnight? Think about the criminal justice system, or even how we reward kids in school based on merit. If it's all determined, how do those systems function if they can only focus on prevention and compassion, stripping away all notions of just deserts, punishment, and praise? What would that actually look like? So what does this all mean for you, maybe how you view the next person you interact with? Thanks for diving deep with us.